Now to be joined on set by Democratic Congressman from Virginia, Gerry Connolly. Congressman, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. I want to talk to you a little bit about a conversation you had with my NBC News colleague, Scott Wong, earlier today. And you said that you have a very direct message for the Biden campaign team. You say they need to resolve doubts, that they need to work harder and a lot harder to resolve those doubts. Otherwise, this is lethal. Explain what you mean by that.
Well, all of us saw what we saw last week in the debate. It's not normal, and it looked much worse than a bad night. And if we're going to clarify that it most certainly was that and only that, then you've got to do two things. Well, we start with a family therapy session, and that has not happened. We need the White House talking to elected Democrats and other Democratic leaders here in Congress and around the country. That has not happened, and it needs to happen. Secondly, there has to be a plan of action for Joe Biden to be Joe Biden, get out there and show what he did in North Carolina, show what he did in the press conference on the Supreme Court ruling on immunity, presidential immunity. You know, that was the Joe Biden we recognize. And so, but you're going to have to spend a lot of time reassuring the public that that was an anomaly and that isn't a characteristic of the president in his 81st year.
Well, do you have the benefit of that time, sir? You're running up against a deadline here where you have to pick a nominee. It's only a couple of weeks away. Is there enough time for President Biden to get out from underneath this performance he had on Thursday night?
I think there can be, yes, but I also think that underscores why we have to have some family therapy.
So what do you mean by that? And what are you frustrated by that you're not getting from the campaign?
I haven't heard a thing from the White House. Not a thing since the debate. And I represent, you know, a member of the congressional delegation to a critical state for Joe Biden, Virginia. You know, we have to carry Virginia's 13 electoral votes. And paying attention to critical states and elected officials in those critical states seems to me to be absolutely top on the list, or ought to be on top of the list of the White House political staff, campaign staff, and White House staff in general. And their silence or lack of aggressive communication right now, I think, is going to lead to more Lloyd Doggetts if they're not careful.
So talk to me about that. Are you having other quiet conversations with some of your fellow members that are expressing what Congressman Doggett is saying publicly? Or is the universe of House Democrats worried about the president's future even greater than what we're seeing publicly displayed?
I think most of my colleagues, like myself, are processing what happened. And we don't want to make decisions in haste or in panic. Joe Biden is a consequential president. He's been a friend of mine. And in fact, I worked for him for 10 years. I've known him for 45. I'm not going to jettison Joe Biden based on a 90-minute debate. But I do want to be reassured that Joe Biden is capable of doing the job, wants to do the job, and that he can reassure the public to both of those things.
So what would be your breaking point then? Like, how long can you wait to get this reassurance from the White House that you feel like you haven't gotten yet?
You know, Ron, I can't answer that. I mean, you know, 3 days and 43 minutes? I don't know. There has to be a process. And at the end of that process, I think we will know collectively what is the right decision.
I wonder what your take is on how the White House seems to be responding to the reporting around what everyone saw on Thursday night. They're trying to dismiss it. They're accusing the media of being too tough on him in certain respects. They're not necessarily directly answering some of the tough questions that are being asked there. Is that a way to get out from underneath this?
I think those are some of the early reactions, trying to defend a difficult night and a difficult performance. This is somebody that generates a lot of personal loyalty because of his own character and personal attributes. And so people are understandably protective of the president on that bad night. But what they have to do once you kind of get over that is allow yourself to be engaged in this sort of therapeutic process with certainly your fellow Democrats so that we can have a dialogue and arrive at an informed decision that makes sense both for President Biden and for the country.
Some of your colleagues have told me privately that one of the things they're worried about is that the cure would actually be worse than the problem that you're dealing with. That if President Biden were to step down, if it led to a brokered convention or a selection of a new nominee, is it going to be Vice President Harris? Is it someone else? Could actually be more difficult, could serve to blow up the entire party process. Is that a concern you share?
It does, and I think that's another reason why we have to have what I call family therapy among the Democratic family. There are so many permutations involving this issue. It's not a simple proposition. Well, let's replace Joe Biden with somebody else. Well, who is that person? How do you do that? How do you deny Joe Biden the nomination when he's got 3,900 pledged delegates he earned in a legitimate electoral process? So. And also, how do you make sure that you're approaching this with the dignity and respect Joe Biden has earned? And so I think we have to have that discussion before we rush to judgment about what the next steps are and who's involved in that.
Is part of President Biden demonstrating to the country that he has what it takes, doing something like taking a mental acuity test, making those results transparent, taking a physical, something along those lines? Would that be productive?
I don't know. Makes me a little leery that we are now going to be subjecting presidential candidates to mental fitness tests and psychology tests. And I mean, I think Donald Trump would certainly flunk any kind of psychiatric evaluation if he would have one. So maybe we should start there. But I do think, however, that there has to be more transparency and more information flowing to the public so that we make informed decisions about our leadership.
I wonder, too, I talked to a lot of your colleagues on Friday after the debate on Thursday, and it seemed to be the resounding opinion I got from many of them as well. Donald Trump is so bad. When a comparison between Donald Trump and anyone, you'd pick anyone. Do you fear or do you wonder if some of your colleagues haven't really taken into account that there are many Americans that are willing to vote for Donald Trump, even if they aren't necessarily huge fans of his, that there's a significant, maybe even 50% of the country that is willing to vote for him, and that Democrats have to provide a viable alternative. It's not just enough to say that you think Donald Trump is a problem.
Absolutely. I think the threat Trump represents is real politically in terms of his ability to win, and that's my North Star. My North Star in this process is going to be, how do we ensure Donald Trump does not get back to the Oval Office? That's going to be my North Star, and everything else is subordinate to that.
And how often and how quickly can you have this conversation, this family therapy session? Are your leaders talking about it? Is Hakeem Jeffries, Pete Aguilar, Congresswoman Clark, are you having these conversations about the House Democrats getting together and trying to find a path forward on this?
I think there are pockets of conversation happening. They have to be engaged, however, with the White House. And not just to leadership, to rank and file. Otherwise, you're going to have people having to make decisions individually in their own silo, and that doesn't help anybody or anything. I respect individual decisions and decisions of conscience. Your reporter talked about 1968. I was in college. I remember that vividly. I was canvassing for then Eugene McCarthy against Lyndon Johnson in Wisconsin. And the reason Lyndon Johnson, among other reasons, got out of the race in March was because he was about to lose the Wisconsin primary. And no sitting president that I know of had ever lost a primary before. And so rather than have that humiliation, and on top of all the other pressures and stress, he decided to pull out.
All right.
So it's a little bit of a different kind of context and situation.
So before you go, I just want to definitively get on the record. At this point, you do not think it's time for the president to step aside, but you need to see more before coming to a final decision?
I have too much respect for Joe Biden and too much affection to jettison him solely based on a performance of a 90-minute debate.
Okay. Congressman Connolly, thank you for being so honest with us. I appreciate you being here.
My pleasure, Ron. Thank you.
Have a very nice holiday, 4th of July weekend.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.